Ajay, Stephanie, Leslie, Michaela, Dylan, and all of us are the Learnalots.
Learnalots. During the summer, we see all kinds of boats and crafts, people enjoying the water. And our earliest form of transportation in Bermuda was boats. Today, we still have skilled craftsmen who build boats here in Bermuda. Why don't we put some information in our supercharged super screen, learn more about the techniques of boat building and why boats were so important in our history.
Hello, Learnalots. Boat building has been a very important part of our history, so I know you want to learn more, so we're going to visit some people who know a great deal about the subject.
Our first stop was to the Maritime Museum to see Dr. Harris. He knows all about the history of boat building in Bermuda.
Good afternoon, Learnalots. Welcome to the Maritime Museum. I'm Dr. Edward Harris. I'm Bermudian, and I run the museum here. I'm an archaeologist by training, and archaeologists, as you know, look into old things, and here we're today to look at old boats and boat building in Bermuda.
When did they first start building boats in Bermuda?
Almost immediately when they came here after settlement in 1612, they began to build little small rowboats out of Bermuda cedar, and they did this so that they could row from St. George's out to some of the other islands like St. David's and catch wild birds, and also to go fishing.
Why did boat building become so important in Bermuda?
Because Bermuda is out in the middle of the Atlantic all by itself, it became very important for Bermudians to have their own boats. And after the Bermuda Company was dissolved in 1618, they could build bigger boats than rowboats, and then they could go into international trading. That is to say, take boats down to the West Indies and trade for salt, take the salt up to Newfoundland and trade it for fish, and bring the fish back to Bermuda. Bermuda was also a very small place, so unlike islands in the West Indies, agriculture was not really a going concern here. We couldn't make sugar plantations and so on. So Bermudians increasingly went into boat building so they could make money and business by trading in their boats. And in fact, many of the boats they sold to other people. They were such good boats.
What did they use to make their boats out of?
They used the Bermuda cedar, which is a superior wood for making boats. Normally with boats you have to season the wood. That's to say, if it was oak, you'd have to cut it down and dry it for a year or so in order to use the wood. Bermuda cedar is remarkable because you can cut the wood down and use it immediately. And it's also incredibly strong. And the other thing that's important about cedar is that the sea termites, there are worms in the ocean that eat through wood, the bottom of the boats. They don't like Bermuda cedar. And so Bermuda cedar boats had very good bottoms, and the bottoms didn't get rotten because the worms didn't eat them up.
What type of ships did they build in those days?
The Bermudians built a number of boats, but the most famous one, which was different from all the other boats, was called the Bermuda Sloop. This was a small boat with one mast, and it was also built with what was called the Bermuda rig, which was an important technological change or innovation, which probably was invented here in Bermuda, by which ships could sail much faster and closer to the wind. Bermuda sloops were very, very fast. They were the fastest boats afloat, and they were made in many hundreds in Bermuda, a lot of them made down in Bailey's Bay Way, and they were sold throughout the West Indies and into North America because they were such beautiful and fast ships. They also made bigger vessels, and in fact the last big Bermuda cedar vessel here was called the Cedrine. She was a brig, a boat with several masts, a ship with several masts, but unfortunately on her maiden voyage going to England to take convicts from the dockyard, she ended up on the beach on the Isle of Wight and was declared a wreck, and so the local people took her apart, and even to this day when you go into a church on the Isle of Wight, all the timbers in the roof are made out of Bermuda cedar, and when you walk in the door you can smell it, because you know what that smells like, don't you?
What did Bermuda slaves have to do with boat building?
Because Bermuda was so small and there weren't that many people here, and because we didn't have the land for plantations, a lot of the slaves were taken into the boat building business by their owners, and a lot of them became very famous boat builders. They also went to sea on these ships. So a lot of the crew on Bermuda sloops going down to the West Indies and so on were Bermudian slaves. And so a lot of them learned to be very expert seamen as well as actually building the boats themselves. So in those early days, Bermudians worked very closely together because when you're at ship, you have to have one hand for the ship and one hand for yourself, and you have to work with all your teammates, otherwise you get into trouble, particularly when you're in storms and things like that. So they built ships, they went to sea on ships, they came home, they traded, and in some cases some of them were paid quite a lot of money for their share of the voyages.
When did boat building stop in Bermuda?
The building of big ships stopped in the 1860s or so. One has to remember that steam vessels had been invented, and that basically meant that big wooden vessels were going to go out of business and they'd be replaced with ships of iron. And as you know, there's no iron in Bermuda, and so we couldn't build iron ships. But boat building itself continued in Bermuda into about 25 years ago when the last Bermuda cedar boats were built. Of course, you know now that there's not that much cedar in Bermuda, so even if you wanted to build a good cedar boat today, because of the blight which killed off a lot of the cedars, you wouldn't be able to have the material you used to have in the past. So it's sad to say, though, that one of our major cultural traditions today is really no longer in existence. And this is because technology has advanced, and also the materials, the wood, the type of wood we used to build the boats out of is really no longer available to build boats.
Hey kids, it's me again! Professor Irvin Mervin Nutty! Okay, now today I'm going to show you a very, very exciting experiment. I'm going to show you how to make your very own space rocket. It's very simple, very simple. First of all, matches, tea bag, parents, I know, I'm sorry, and safety goggles. Gotta wear your safety goggles, because if you don't have your safety goggles, you know, this one involves fire, so you burn your eyes out or something. All right, so what we gotta do now is get the tea bag, take off the label. Most tea bags have a special little staple here. You can just rip it out. It's no problem. Now, you have to get the kind of tea bags that unravel like this into like a tube formation. Pour out the tea, because you don't need that. It's not involved. You can save that for later. Make like iced tea or something. I don't know. What you want to do with it? All right, and so now, here's what I prepared earlier. I've always wanted to say that. All right, so what you got to do is put the tube onto the table. Get your parents to light it for you, because I don't want you to burn in your house, because they're going to come to me and blame me, and I'm going to have to, you know, cover for you. All right, so here we go. Watch this, kids. Strike the match. Get your parents to light it all the way around in a circle, okay? Now watch. Now, the reason why that happened is because there's a column of hot air in the tube when it's burning. The hot air goes down, and the bottom of it rises up. Very simple. Same principle as a hot air balloon. No problem. All right then, kids. Another exciting experiment from me, Professor Irvin Mervin Nutty. And I'll see you next time on the Learnalots. Goodbye, kids.
We heard there was an exhibition of modeled boats at the National Gallery, so we went along to talk to Mr. Michael Hooper, who built most of the models.
Hi, Learnalots. Thanks for coming to the National Gallery. My name is Michael Hooper, and I built the model boats you see here. And I'm going to talk to you about how we do it and what they all are.
What type of wood do you use?
I try and use the same woods that the original boats were built out of. So if you look inside them, you'll see the light-colored wood is spruce, and that's what they use to plank it. And then the pieces for the seats and the knees and everything else is Bermuda cedar. Some of the older boats were built entirely out of Bermuda cedar, and I do some like that, but these ones that you see here aren't. The Bermuda Sloop, the racing sloop over there, that's entirely out of Bermuda cedar, and that's what they were built out of in the anywhere from 1850 up until 1910.
Why is that one called a Bermuda Sloop?
That's called a Bermuda Sloop because of the rig. A sloop is generally a boat with one mast, one main sail, and one jib. In Bermuda, in the 1840s and probably a little bit earlier, no one knows exactly when, they started making their sails like that, which were just basic triangles. Before, they would have had a piece of wood across the top called a gaff. And what they found was that with these boats like this, they could sail closer into the wind than any other boat could. If you look at the square rigger here, if the wind was blowing this way, he could just about make headway in it. They would have to take all those sails and swing them around as close as they could. And so if the wind is blowing right against you, the big old square riggers could only sail like at maybe an 80, 75-degree angle. The Bermuda rig boats could sail at a 45-degree angle or less, so they would save a lot more time if they had to get from here to here with the wind blowing against you. The old boats would have to do this, zigzag, way back and forward, whereas the Bermuda boats could just do that. Okay, does anybody know what kind of boat this is?
A pilot boat?
Yeah? Do you know why it's called a pilot boat?
Because they used to take the pilots out in it.
You just learned that. Yeah, they used to take the Bermudian pilots out to the ships to bring the ships in through the reefs and the channels. And a lot of the time before they had the channels cut. So you needed a Bermudian who knew his way around the rocks and the reefs to get the big ships into the harbors.
What does this flag mean?
That flag is actually the letter H, but if you were to make a message out of all your signal flags, that would be the letter H. But when it's on its own, it means I have a pilot on board.
The Bermuda fitted dinghy is very famous, and we asked Mr. Hooper to explain why. He started by showing us how dinghies have changed their shape over the years.
This is an old fitted dinghy contest built in 1897. If you look at the dinghy we looked at before, it's very close to the same hull shape. If you look, it had a lot of deadwood down here. That's called deadwood, and a wine glass transom. And that was good back in 1897, but in the end, they found out that that wasn't as fast as a boat that didn't have that, because that created more drag. So they put a deep fin keel on it and shortened the whole bottom of the boat like that. Okay? But if you look at this one has a really hollow scoop in here. And what that does is, as the boat's moving through the water, it's pushing the water out. And they found that, this was in 1952, they found out that that slowed the boat down a little bit more. So they progressed again, and they kept the same sort of bottom, which is a lot flatter now, to keep the boat up on it, on top of the water. And if you look, all that hollow that was in there is not there anymore. So that's so that the boat will come right up out of the water and stay on top of it, rather than trying to plow a big path through it.
How long does a fitted dinghy have to be?
They're 14 feet long on the deck, and they can carry up to a 41, 44-foot mast. And that's why they have the biggest sails on any small boat on Earth. And the reason they have that is because they started racing. In the beginning, they were just work boats. And what happened was the guys would go out with their big boats, catch all the fish, put it in their little dinghy, and sail that back to town. Well, the last one into town didn't sell his fish because the first guys sold all theirs already. So the guy said, yeah, well, next time I'll put a bigger sail on mine and I'll race him in and I'll sell my fish first. And it just took off like that. Then in the 1860s, 1850s, we had a lot of naval officers at the dockyard. And they were buying these dinghies and the sloops and having them built, and they were started to race them. And the type evolved into what you see now. You'd never use that boat now to go fishing in. You see, it doesn't even stand up by itself. And you certainly wouldn't use it to carry fish from your fishing boat way out on Challenger Bank or whatever all the way in. So right now, all they are used for is strictly racing, and that's why the sails are so big. And they only race them inshore in protected waters. They don't go out to sea anymore.
Look at that. Made the Bermuda timeline. Look at that boat. It has the same rigging as the pilot boat in there. That looks like the Bermuda Sloop that's in there.
Early 1840, creators of Bermuda Native Yacht Club formed by black pilots and fishermen. In 1700, Bermuda's fleet consisted of 60 sloops, 6 brigantines, and up to 400 two-masted boats.
That looks like the schooner that's in there.
We are here at a small beach and park and dockyard. As you can see, there are hundreds of pieces of broken up plastic and other litter washed up onto the area. This is disgusting. All the trash must have been dumped into the sea at one time and has ended up here. This is a hazard to marine life and humans. Please don't throw away any kind of trash into the water. Dispose of it properly for all our sakes. For the Learnalots program, this is Tony Trush reporting.
Up at Dockyard, there's some modern-day boat building and restoration going on, and we went up to see for ourselves.
Good morning, Learnalots. Welcome to the Chicane Boat Shop. My name is Reed Kemp. I'm the owner of this boat. We want to show you around today, show you the workshop, the tools that are needed to do this restoration, the work itself, and introduce you to Joe and Wendy, our shipwrights, who are doing the work for us.
How old is this ship and how long have you been restoring it?
Chicane was built in 1926 in Wales. She is a Scottish designer. We've had her here in the shed almost 9 years and have been restoring her slowly and painfully and accurately.
Do you have to use any special materials to rebuild this boat?
We certainly do. We use a lot of very unusual materials, at least unusual today. We're using all traditional methods and traditional materials. So there's oakum, which was used for caulking in between the planks. Of course, many different types of wood. We've probably got about 6 different types of wood, from teak to Douglas fir, mahogany, of course, white oak, and so on. Then there's silicon bronze fastening. So all those planks are held and nailed, some nailed, and half nails and half screws. And they're great big silicon bronze fastenings which go in. There's bedding compounds, primers, epoxy paint. We've done some, obviously, modern gluing techniques where it made sense. So, yes, there's a whole range of very different types of material in this boat.
How big is the boat?
Chicane is 56 feet long. She's about 8 feet deep in the water. So, as you'll see, she's very tall here in the workshop. She weighs 26 tons. So she's a big, solid ocean cruiser, ocean racer, as what we call them. Certainly being built, you know, in the 20s, some time ago, she was built very solidly, very strongly, meant to last a long time, meant to be very smooth and comfortable at sea. So she's very different from a 56-footer that would be built today, which would weigh half as much. So, Learnalots, should we take a look at the workshop and some of the plans that we're using to do the restoration? Let's go have a look. So here's some of the plans we're using for our restoration. The original construction drawings from 1926. As you can see, some of the very, very early engineering drawings of the boat. Here's one recently of the new exhaust system, which we're building for the boat. And the electrical system is extremely complex. Again, lots of drawings here showing breaker panels, different circuits, and so on. So it is a very large engineering project which we're doing here.
What are these plans?
These are construction drawings of fine detail for deck hatches and things. You can see here's a hinge, here's a panel, and so forth. And these are the drawings that Joe and Wendy use from a designer in England, which helped them to build all of their pieces of the boat. Let's go and have a look now at what Wendy is up to, because she's doing some work like this right now.
Hi, Learnalots.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, are you enjoying your tour of the workshop?
Yes, certainly are. Yes.
My name's Wendy Bliss, and today I'm working on deck furniture. These are called skid lights. They go up on deck, and you can see them here. This is a profile of chicane. This is the skid light here. These are the skid lights here. Now, the main objective for me today is to try and place a rubber seal in here to keep the water out. So if you'd like, I'll step over to my project over here and show you how I do that.
Sure.
This is a router, and it's set up to make a groove to place that rubber seal in. I went a little bit off my line here, but what will happen is the gasket will lay nicely in this groove.
So let me show you some of the other work that Wendy has done. This is the inside of chicane's hull very early on. You can see a lot of the rot that was in the frames, the blackening of that, awful lot of rot. The frames were replaced by Joe and Wendy, and here we see them doing their work with a bent frame. This is a 2x2 piece of oak. It's been steamed in a box. It's gotten quite pliable. Wendy has run it upstairs and jammed it down in here. Joe takes it, they bend it onto the hull, then they use these clamps here to crank it down to the hull and put the fastenings through. So let's go and have a look at that inside the boat and see what it's like today.
Hi, Learnalots. My name is Raymond Lambert. I'm from Windjammer Water Sports. I'm also working with the Bermuda Sloop Foundation. Unlike the project you just saw at Chicane, boats today have advanced in quite a number of ways. Most boats today are built out of a material called fiberglass. You may be all familiar with fiberglass resin. That's the gooey stuff that you'd often see. But with the resin also comes the material itself, which is the cloth, the fiberglass cloth. Here I have a couple different variations of that cloth. The first that I'm going to show you is something called the chop strand. This is something which you often use when you first start building the boat. It's something that adheres well to the mold, and it's also something of a spacer. After that, you then put in something called a 10-ounce woven. This is a light woven. This is something that you use for small light jobs. A similar material to that would be a 24-ounce woven, which is what I have here. As you can see, that's a lot thicker than the stuff you was just looking at. And today, yeah, it's real stretchy. Today, there's even a more advanced material called stitch mat. And what they've done with stitch mat basically is combine the woven and the cloth together with one material which is known as stitch mat. Over here, I have a mold of a boat that is built in today's basic fiberglass methods. What happens is the first thing you do, as I said earlier, is you use glass, but before you put on the glass, you put on something called gel coat. That gives you the color. Then you put your various layers of cloth on top until you get it to the right thickness, and use with the resin along with that. And you use these little rollers here. This is a general roller with a regular roller sleeve, just the same way you'd use for painting. And you'd apply the resin with this roller. Once you have it applied, then you use these two hard rollers. These are two different types. And what this does is this gets the air bubbles out. So there's one roller, and there's a little small one that you'd use to get in tight little nooks and crannies, just like that, which you'd also use. Once you get it to your appropriate thickness, you would then pop it out of the mold, and then you have your boat.
Hi, Learnalots. I'm Alan Berland of the Bermuda Sloop Foundation, and as Raymond mentioned to you, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the exciting Bermuda Sloop project that we're hoping to get underway in the next year.
What's the purpose of the Bermuda Sloop Foundation?
The purpose of the Bermuda Sloop Foundation is threefold. The first purpose is sail training. And have any of you been involved in sail training or done any ocean sailing?
I went to New York.
And what sort of experience was that for you?
Good experience.
And that's just the sort of thing that we want to do for other youngsters in Bermuda. perhaps as many as 1,500, exposing all of the middle school children to a sailing experience, and then going on to more in-depth sail training after that. The second purpose of the Bermuda Sloop Foundation is to really try to capture our shared maritime history. And as you'll see from some of the photographs behind me here, Bermuda had a great history, a great maritime history involving all of our races. This is a painting that was done in 1834 of a Bermuda sloop entering the harbor in Kingston, Jamaica. And this vessel looks sleek, and to the untrained eye would look like a vessel of today. And the Bermudians did a phenomenal job in developing sailboats that were very fast and sleek and were the envy of the world. In fact, the Royal Navy and the French Navy and others came to Bermuda to purchase these vessels. But from a shared maritime history, Bermudians worked together, the blacks and whites in that era, and this is a period that spanned the emancipation of slavery. They worked together as teams to help build these boats, and they worked together as teams to crew the boats when they went to sea. So it's a great history that we have, and it's one that we'd like to see preserved.
What's the third reason for building the sloop?
The third reason for building the Bermuda Sloop is to help with the marketing of Bermuda, both here locally and internationally. So she would be available for corporate citizens to charter for a day here on the island. They could use it for photo shoots, they could use it for entertainment functions, and also she could be used overseas. So if there was say a conference, like a RIMS conference up in New York, the sloop could go up, crewed by Bermudians, to host perhaps one of the functions there, which would be, again, a great thing for Bermuda to show its stuff a bit, maybe have fish chowder and a dark and stormy or two on the deck of the vessel. So marketing is the third reason that we want to build the Bermuda Sloop, and it's a main reason, or it's a big help in helping to finance the building of the sloop and the maintaining of the sloop.
Because Bermuda is an island surrounded by water, boat building has played a major role in shaping our history. From boats built for trading to racing, we can be proud of the technology and skills we have developed and shared with the rest of the world.